Hi there. Okay, so just me today for the biggest key area that is in this unit, possibly the entire course. So there's going to be 5 videos on it. It is a large key area. There's quite a lot in it. My advice would be the summary tables at the ends of each of these videos are going to be very, very useful because there's, again, lots of detail in this. And if you're really struggling with this key area, maybe just trying to memorize those tables might be a good idea. But let's get cracking on key area 4 of unit 3, which is neurobiology and immunology. And we're starting with the structure of neurons. So from National 5, remember we did look at neurons before. There are 3 types. You've got your sensory, inter, and motor neurons. Receptors in the sense organs detect stimuli and pass signals down sensory neurons, and sensory neurons carry that signal to the central nervous system, CNS. The central nervous system generates signals and passes these down motor neurons in order to move muscles. And it's electrical signals that travel down neurons, which is good because those are very, very rapid in comparison to, say, hormonal transport, which is a bit slower because it uses the bloodstream. So neurons allow for rapid communication and control across the body. Okay, if you think about moving your hand, it moves at almost the same time as you think about it. The nervous system sends signals across these cell types to organs to enable all nervous activity. So conscious and unconscious movement, things like, your digestive system, you can't think really hard and make that move, but it's still operational, it's still kind of movement. Neurons pass signals down special fibers in their bodies to other neurons across their synapses. So we're going to be looking at the special fibers for a little bit as well. So this is the structure of a neuron there, and there's a word dendrite that is slightly blurred out by the picture of me here. Okay, so we've got 3 basic parts that you need to know of the actual neuron, and that's the dendrites, the cell body, and the axons. Okay, each of these parts has a role in the transmission of nervous signals or the generation of nervous signals. The dendrites are those little straggly bits that you can see coming out at the top of the neuron. They are nerve fibers, and the idea is they are sort of a network that reaches out in order to receive signals from another neuron or a sense organ. So it's not like they literally move to reach out, as in they're spread out and they sit there waiting for chemicals to come across from other neurons to activate that particular neuron that they're attached to. So when those dendrites receive a signal, they then pass these signals to the cell body. The cell body has got the main parts of the cell that we're familiar with. So things like the cytoplasm, nucleus, mitochondria, ribosomes, standard cell stuff that's inside there, standard cell organelles that's in there. The DNA in the nucleus is important because it's got the genes for producing neurotransmitters that's inside of that. What that means is neurotransmitters are essentially chemicals that are going to cross the synapse, and they need to be built individually. And so the DNA in those will be essentially activated to allow the production of those particular proteins. The axon, you can see labeled there, is a long cell structure that can carry nervous signals at speed. Okay, so I like to think of it like the copper cable inside electrical wire. So you've got like the plastic around the outside, and then you've got the copper cable that's actually carrying the electricity running through it. The axon is very similar to that. Okay, the ends of the axon terminate at the synapse between 2 neurons. So it's just blotted out where I am sitting, but that second arrow there is indicating where the synapse would be. Okay, so that second arrow down at the bottom of the diagram, that's where you'd find the synapse. The axon is surrounded by something called a myelin sheath. So that's what we're going to look at next. But again, the metaphor of comparing it, say, to an electrical wire, kind of like this, where the idea is there's a little bit of copper that runs, or metal that runs along the inside of it, but it's surrounded by plastic on the outside. And what that plastic on the outside allows to do is the signal goes in one direction from where you want it, from where it started to where you want it to be. Okay, now why that's useful is if this plastic wasn't here, you'd get electrical signals firing off absolutely everywhere, and that's not very useful. So the myelin sheath is formed around the axon of a neuron during early development. Okay, so when you were first born, you didn't have a massive amount of myelin sheath around your neurons. And when you were first conceived, it's not like boom, neuron, instantly myelin sheath. It takes time to form. So it's from conception to around 3 years old. Okay, so 3 years old is where your myelin sheath is finally about finished. Okay, The job of the myelin sheath is very important. It's actually those first 4 words that's up there. The myelin sheath insulates the axon, and what that does is it allows the speed of impulses to be increased. Okay, so the axon, the speed of the impulses speeds up with myelin sheath better than without it. Okay, now if you think about this, this is why smaller children have really slower reaction speeds compared to absolute babies. Okay, so absolute babies, what you find is you throw a ball at them, like a nice soft ball, don't obviously chuck a baseball in their face, but you throw a ball at them and it maybe hits them on the forehead, and then they go about 3 seconds later, like, something happened there. Whereas you take a 4-year-old and you throw a ball at them, they might even be able to catch it because their neurons are just working a little bit faster, and that enables them to receive the sensory information from their eyes a little bit quicker, but also coordinate that movement of their hands a little bit quicker. Okay, this GIF I really like because it shows exactly this effect. Okay, so the top one has myelin sheath, the bottom one does not have myelin sheath, and you can see, for one thing, the speed of transmission is faster with the myelin sheath, but for the second thing as well, the signal is much stronger, whereas the signal without the myelin sheath does tend to fade away a little bit. And again, if we compare it to the electric wire metaphor, if there was no plastic sheathing on this electric wire, what we'd get is the electricity would basically be firing off in all directions, and it might not reach the destination that we need it to, which is inside my computer. Okay, myelin sheath is produced by something called glial cells. Okay, so these are cells that surround the outside of the axon fiber, and they also act to support the neurons, making sure that they stay in place. So they also have a structural role. So that's a very important thing about glial cells. Okay, now if the myelin sheath becomes damaged, and there are some diseases that can cause this, the neurons experience problems with the correct transmission of signals and the fast transmission of signals. And what this means is people lose coordination and speed in their movement and become a little bit clumsy. The acts that require immense amount of coordination, like walking or talking, tend to become more difficult. And in some cases, diseases that affect the myelin of neurons, if it's that bad, can be fatal. Okay, an example of a disease that affects the myelin sheath, this is a little bit extra, is multiple sclerosis. Okay, now this is an autoimmune condition, and we'll look at autoimmune conditions when we look at the immune system in the second half of this unit. But this is where the immune system accidentally attacks the myelin sheath. For some reason, the immune cells recognize it as foreign and attack it, and this breaks down the myelin sheath. That video link there is to the NHS website. I think it's one of the My Stories, so it's somebody who has been diagnosed with multiple sclerosis and the kind of symptoms that they suffer from. So you could pause the video and try and type it in if you wanted, or if you're on this way, you should be able to just click the link and it'll take you straight to that video. A weird fact of multiple sclerosis is the northeast of Scotland shows an abnormally high rate of it. There's anthropologists who've essentially tried to work out why this might be. One school of thought is thinking that maybe it's the high prevalence of Viking genes. Essentially, the north of Scotland is more related to Scandinavia due to descent of populations than, say, the rest of Scotland. And it might be something in that DNA makes more susceptible to MS. Others blame the lack of sunlight. Sunlight helps you produce vitamin D inside your body, and it is known that the vitamin D helps maintain the processes that maintain glial cells and the myelin sheath. So it's a bit of a weird one there, but there are two schools of thought around the possible causes for this. For those who don't know, I lived up in the North Scotland for a wee while, and during winter it gets light at about 9:30, 10 o'clock, and it gets dark then again about 3 o'clock. So your hours of daylight are severely reduced during winter, but they're massively increased during summer. When I was living up during summer, I don't think it got dark at all. Maybe around midnight for a couple of hours. So that's the end of this part of it, so just the structure of the neurons. So we've got dendrites receive neurotransmitters from other neurons and signals from sense organs. The cell body contains nucleus and ribosomes and mitochondria and cytoplasm, you know, the things that are inside an animal cell. The axon is the fiber that transmits electrical signals down the length of the neuron, and the myelin sheath insulates the axon for faster transmission of signals down the axon, and that's produced by glial cells. Okay. The next section of what we're going to be looking at is more detail about synapses, so I'll see you in the video number 2 of 5.